In this video, we're going to talk about how you can actually win more in life using negotiation skills. Now, there's a lot of negotiation teachers here on YouTube and just in the world in general who were trained by the FBI hostage negotiation team in life or death situations. And my question to you is, are you usually negotiating in life or death situations? For me, it's probably not. So maybe you should just learn some negotiation skills for someone who doesn't actually practice in life or death situations, because that's maybe a little bit different and a little bit too intense for the day-to-day negotiations you need to do. The truth is, everything that you have today in your life and everything you don't have but still want is a result of your negotiation skills or lack thereof. So if you want a better position, more commissions, leadership role, a better car, a better house, a better spouse, whatever it is that you want, negotiation skills can help you get it. This isn't about life or death hostage scenarios. This is just about the everyday wins that compound over time. It's about how often do you pay retail price for the things that we all have to buy every day versus how much could you save every year by just finding ways to not pay retail price for everything you buy. This video is for you if you've ever wanted to do any one of the following: work less while earning more, get paid more than others for the same job or the same type of work, work in better environments or work from home when everyone else has to go to an office, buy more home for less money, get superior trade-in value on your vehicles every time you go to buy a new vehicle, buy better cars for less money, secure better loan terms or secure better terms with landlords, with HOAs, with anyone you contract with. Look at the rules, decide what you don't want to apply to you, and get out of it. Get seated at the best tables in the restaurants, skip lines at exclusive clubs, get VIP service anywhere you go. Over a lifetime, these skills will put hundreds of thousands, and maybe even millions of dollars in your pocket while dramatically improving the quality of your life. So before you get into this video, I want you to pause it and think of what are the 3 things in your life that you want to be better right now. And then for the rest of this video, as you're taking notes, write down how could you use the negotiation skills I'm about to teach you to negotiate those better outcomes that you actually want. So by the end of the video, I promise you, you're going to have 3 strategies and 3 tactics you can use to get them. Let's dive into it. Tactic number 1, the toddler level power move, making no work for you. Here's how you do it. A clean, unqualified no followed by deliberate silence. If someone says, "Can you do X?" you can just say, "No, I cannot." Now, what this is going to do is not only is it going to draw a very firm, bright boundary, but it's going to oftentimes get your counterparty to start negotiating against themselves. They're going to immediately come back, because you've been silent for 10 plus seconds, with a counter offer. Well, what if we did $100 less or $1,000 less? Or could you do X, a lower figure? And so on. This is what you want. Don't rescue the silence. As you've probably learned before, the person most comfortable with silence in any interaction is going to win. If they hard no you, don't counter yourself. Be aware. People might use this tactic on you. They might just say, "No, I can't do that." Don't counter yourself. An example would be, I was in France and I was in one of these markets where there's a lot of antiques and different pieces of bric-a-bracs that they're trying to sell to unsuspecting tourists. So there happened to be a vase that my wife really wanted. And so I took it to the guy in charge of the stall and I said, "Could you do 20 euros for this?" I think it was marked to 50 euro or something like that. And he says, no, impossible. Now, of course, me knowing negotiations, I knew that the worst thing I could do would be like, okay, if it's impossible for you to take 20 euro, how about 25 euro? How about 30 euro? How about 40 euro? Negotiating against myself and giving him more euro than I really needed to. The appropriate response there, which I did implement, was, "It's not impossible. It's very possible. Look, I have 20 euro right here. You have the Vase. We can transact. It's very possible," right? He was making a claim. It's impossible. And I'm saying, no, actually, dude, it's quite possible. You could just take my 20 euros and I could walk off with the Vase that is probably only worth 5 euro. So needless to say, that tactic from his side did not work to get me to come up in price. I ended up spending, I think, 15 euro for the lamp. If someone does use this tactic on you, the no into silence, and they're just like, "No, I cannot do that." What you can ask is, "Well, I understand you can't do that. What could you do?" That's a way to get the conversation started again. But a better tactic, frankly, is just to be silent yourself and stare at them until they start negotiating. Okay, tactic number 2. This is going to be somewhat controversial, but I have to give it to you guys because this is one of the most high-octane, high-powered tactics you could possibly know in terms of negotiation and selling, which is stress inoculation techniques. So sometimes, in rare instances, your counterparty will try to bully you by using various levels of emotional tone and language. They could get higher in volume. They could get more stressed in pitch. They could get in your face. They could get close to you. They could start waving their arms. The whole point of all this behavior is to get you emotional so you lose your cool, lose your head, and you get dumber. Studies have shown that emotional people, when people are actually in a heightened emotional state, meaning scared, angry, if someone's been calling you names, it's going to put you in an emotional state. It actually makes you 20 to 30% dumber. Meaning, you know, all those memes about, oh, you only use 12% of your brain capacity. This actually happens when you get emotionally upset. You use a lower percentage of your brain capacity. So you get dumber. You lose IQ points when you get emotional. There goes the old saying, if you can't control your emotions, you can't control your money. Every negotiation I later regretted where I lost in some way, shape, or form, I can trace back to me losing my emotional cool. When I had a goal and I wanted to get something done and my counterparty made me upset, then I gave up that goal. Every single time it was because I lost my emotional cool. Always, always, always ask yourself in these negotiations, who benefits if I get emotional, if I get heated? Who benefits? The answer is always your counterparty, because if you get dumber, their IQ stays the same. What do you think is going to happen with the negotiation? That's right. You're going to get the worst end of it. Flip this around. If you make your counterparty emotional, they get dumber. You stay smart by comparison. But I still think this is a black hat or not very ethical strategy to try to get your counterparty to get emotional. So you need to pre-train your nervous system so fighting with a bully on Zoom feels like light sparring. Here's how you do that. Have a role play partner go full gremlin on your face for 10 to 20 minutes, meaning they're going to call you names, they're going to use profanity, they're going to scream at you, they're going to be as triggering as they possibly can be. And your only goal is to breathe, keep breathing deeply, keep a neutral expression, and keep yourself calm internally. Keep your nervous system from firing, from going into fight or flight. Having someone shout in your face, having someone scream obscenities at you in extremes is going to inoculate your nervous system. If you keep the focus on breathing, keeping your nervous system calm, keeping a neutral expression, keeping neutral thoughts. You can also pre-choose a line that you can put on repeat. So you don't have to think about what you're going to say next. You don't have to engage with their conversation. If someone's throwing all kinds of accusations at you, if they're getting emotional, if they're flooding the zone with BS, if they're trying to baffle you with BS, the best thing you could do is not try to engage with each new line of BS they send your way, but put on broken record, put on repeat a single phrase like, I just have to think about it. 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 Or I can't have this conversation right now. I'm not going to decide right now. I'm not going to decide right now. I'm not going to decide right now. And if someone is actually doing that in a real negotiation, you can even set a boundary and say, if you're going to continue screaming, this conversation is over. Give them a couple warnings and then close the Zoom or walk out of the room or whatever you need to do to get away from them. That will, if they're just using it as a tactic to try to get you to be uncool and lose your cool, then they're quickly going to reverse because they don't really want to lose the negotiation. They want to stay in negotiation with you. And if you threaten to withdraw yourself and leave, they're going to quickly change their behavior so that you can stay. If you do feel yourself going into fight or flight mode, and that's why we practice this, by the way, so you can notice in your own body, you can build the physiological and the somatic sensory awareness so that you know when you're going into fight and flight or you're about to tip into that level. You can say, maybe we should cool off and talk about it in a couple days. I'll get back to you, right? Just that simple. Tactic number 3 that I want you to put into practice is equal in pain.
The concept here is some counterparties will only trust a deal if it hurts you both equally on both sides.
Framing for mutual modest discomfort legitimizes the agreement and is going to reduce your post-deal flaking. So the script here is, look, this is probably going to end with us both being a little bit uncomfortable. I'll give you more than you want. You'll give me a little bit more than I want in a different area, but we're both going to end up better off. So what number would be a little uncomfortable on your side? I'm going to match with scope on mine. For example, use sparingly. This is a tool for hardliners who are not going to accept win-win framing, and they seem to want to push you to lose a little bit. Some people in negotiations, you still have to do a deal with them, but they will only let the deal go forward if they feel like you're losing and you're bleeding out a little bit. So in that case, you can go into that frame and say, hey, I get it. I'm going to have to bleed out more than I want to. You're probably going to have to bleed out more than you want to as well in some other areas. So name where you're going to take a loss here, and I'll name where I'm going to take a loss. Or if you want me to take this big of a hit over here, I'm willing to do that, but only if you match it on your side. So how can you match that? Combine that with clear next steps and immediate written recap to lock in the agreement if you do happen to get in that moment a big concession or something that you want. Now that's the tactics. Now tactics are distinct from strategy, and strategy is a big picture, high level overview. Tactics are things you can do in the moment. You need both to get the most out of negotiations in the world. So start with your strategies and realize what strategies you're going to carry around the world with you, and then always be willing to deploy tactics as necessary to get your way. So the first strategy I'm going to teach you guys is MABO, make a better offer. The fastest way to increase MABO or make a better offer is to increase the logistical intensity that you're taking on for them. Give more people, more stuff, faster, and your offer magically becomes better. Or give them a better guarantee, take on more risk on yourself as opposed to giving it to them, and you're going to make a better offer. Add more deliverables. Let's say you're in an agency, you're going to build 3 additional landing pages for free, or you're going to shoot more VSLs for them, or you're going to write all the copy on the scripts. Assume more risk. Pay to run the first 1,000 visitors through each page, no matter what it costs. Test and optimize. Guaranteed results. You could keep testing up to 6 more variations until you find a winner. Make success inevitable. When you tip the scales way more heavily onto their side, where they basically can't lose, then it's going to be extremely difficult for them not to agree to work with you. Remember, when value outweighs cost, people will buy. Think of this in the dating context. Let's say there's someone very attractive that you'd love to go on a date with, and you ask them, hey, are you busy Thursday night? I'd like to take you to a nice dinner. Let's say they say, no, I don't know if I'm not sure if I'm going to go. I'm not sure if I'm open on Thursday night. I'll let you know, right? Very non-committal. The thing you could do if you absolutely positively had to see this person that week, gun to your head, which I wouldn't recommend in dating, but let's say you just want to use this and go for broke and strike while the iron is hot. Maybe the person is leaving out of the country for 6 months. You want to make sure you get a chance to see them before they go overseas. You could escalate it. Say like, oh, well, actually, I have tickets to this rock concert to see Elvis Presley reincarnated that night. Would you like to come? I can give you a ticket. Or, oh, I'm also going to take you on a private jet tour of the Grand Canyon after the Elvis Presley show. To use a ridiculous example, if you stack enough value, eventually that person is going to say, all right, I'm coming with you Thursday night. I'm going to cancel all my other plans. I guess it's worth getting off my couch if I'm going to see Elvis Presley reincarnated and then go on a jet tour of the Grand Canyon. Now we're going to talk about strategy 2, which is the balance of leverage. Negotiations turn on who has the balance of leverage on their side of the equation. In other words, who needs it less? Who needs the deal less? This is why you should market aggressively enough to always have a full pipeline. You should always have more leads from a sales context. So here's a Disney story. When Walt Disney was first starting out, he had to make bad deals that were unfair to his studio, in other words, that underpaid Disney Studios, because he was constantly in debt and no one would pay him fair wages, even though he was producing obviously technically groundbreaking films at the time. After he released Snow White, which was their first big hit, it was a mega hit. Okay. And suddenly all his production deals and his distribution deals got way better because there was nobody who could make a picture like Snow White. There was only one Disney Studios. And so Walt Disney started dictating way better terms and pricing. That is balance of leverage. Because people knew he had the goods and he had a product that no one else could duplicate at the time, he had the balance of leverage and he got way more favorable terms on all his deals. That tells us there's 3 paths to leverage. 1 is create such a good product there's nothing like it out there, the Disney way. 2, create such unique positioning that people will pay premium prices. This is what a company like Nike has done. You know, they're just shoes, right? It's just athletic gear, but they have such a strong brand and such unique positioning, and they've owned it for so long. They've owned the idea of health. They've owned the idea of athletic competition for so long that people will pay premium prices still today. And then 3, have such abundant lead flow that you can pick and choose clients, and you don't need any one particular client to come and buy your stuff. Some numbers for you guys. Maximum dependency, if you are an agency or a small business, it's a great idea not to let any one client, supplier, customer, channel, or employee be over 15% of your business. If you have one closer who's closing more than 15% of your deals, you probably should build up that so you don't have a dependency on that one closer. That's the hero closer problem in a nutshell. When someone becomes 30 to 50% of your ability to deliver, you're extremely susceptible to changes or negotiations. If you have an employee who's 50% of what you can do, they're basically unfireable because firing them would tank your entire business. So be careful of those dependencies and the balance of leverage. Strategy number 3 is a really powerful one, which is negotiate away from the table. When you look at great power politics and you look at geopolitics, which is a side interest of mine, and I read a lot of books and study a lot about the great negotiators of geopolitics, Kissinger and JFK and folks of that nature. And when we look at major trade deals and we look at political deals and economic economic deals and wars, we often see that the great power players are negotiating away from the table. Now, maybe there's an official come together in some neutral territory like Geneva, but often they're back channeling and they're doing these deals all away from the table so that when they come to the table, they're just confirming what they've already agreed to in the cloakrooms of the world. This is prioritizing what is called deal design over silver tongues and tactics. Everything that we've talked about today so far has been a lot about silver tongue, especially the tactics, right? That's what to say when, how to control your emotions, all that stuff. Sequencing and timing become extremely important. Getting the right people involved in the right order, facing the right consequences if they don't come to the table with solutions. So the first step here is power mapping. You need to know whose interests align with yours, what their additional interests are, in other words, what do they want, and how you can maneuver between parties. There's a saying about geopolitics that is, countries don't have friends, they have interests. And when those interests align, that's what we call allies. So you have to just think about what are the interests that are part of this negotiation, what do they want, and realize that none of them are going to be my friends, but some of them might be my allies because we can align our interests prior to getting to the negotiation table. Then that leads us to number 2, the second part of negotiating away from the table, which is back channel conversations and side channel conversations. Talk to people who can create and apply pressure to the party who needs the most pressure. This is something, by the way, that in recent geopolitics, if you look at, for example, the example of Russia. Russia has a GDP, I think it's smaller than the state of Texas in the US. So they're an economically weak country, but yet they've been able to punch far above their weight on the global stage because they've been able to back channel and side channel conversations with, for instance, the US president. I think there was a recent example in the last 5 years where Vladimir Putin was able to sit and talk with the US president privately with no translators, with no Secret Service, with no one else in the room for, I think, 3 to 4 hours. So that's an immense display of power, of just the power of a back channel conversation where nobody else is listening. You could do incredible work on someone with silver tongue tactics and manipulation and flattery and ego stroking to get them in your pocket if they were a weak leader in that 3 to 4 hours of time. So that would be an example of a back channel or a side channel conversation. And then that very weak country of Russia could apply power to a very strong country, the US, to make the US weaker, to make Russia's enemies weaker, to make Russia's allies stronger. All kinds of things could happen in that scenario. That's why a lot of you, if you feel like you're not in a very powerful leveraged negotiating position, because maybe you're a small business or you're a solopreneur or you're a new employee at a company, think of the example of Russia. And think of the example of other small countries like maybe Ukraine that have punched way above their weight class and gotten, for instance, a huge international community around them and behind them and propping them up. Because of the interests that are aligned, maybe other countries in the region want to balance Russia's power, and they're going to use Ukraine to do it. So that would be an example of their interests aligning with Ukraine against Russia. They're not interested in the Ukrainian people per se necessarily, but they are very interested in checking the power of a regional rival such as Russia. So they might align and do what the Ukrainian people would prefer that they do. Don't ever assume that you're just too new or too young or too powerless to compete in sort of these great power games, because if you can find partners whose interests align with yours and apply pressure to them, you could potentially get way outsized outcomes for your experience level or for your actual economic size. Number 3 is public and private statements. What you say publicly that counterparties will hear versus what you say privately to get the deal done. Public statements exert influence and stake out positions, and they can also give the game away. So, for instance, let's say that country A and country B are in some kind of economic tension that could flare up into military or kinetic tension. And country A says, oh, nuclear weapons are off the table. Unprompted, unbidden. They just say this in the public press, in the world stage. Well, that is a really stupid decision because that's a public statement that then holds them to a standard of not using nuclear weapons. That's why oftentimes you'll see great powers say things like, nothing is off the table in this conflict, which includes nuclear weapons, for example. So they're publicly committing to, we could do anything. You don't even know how crazy we could get, right? Nothing is off the table is refusing to set a standard and a constraint on yourself. But if you publicly commit to setting a constraint on yourself, then that's very unwise. You're allowing other powers to then maybe dictate terms because they're not going to hold themselves to the same standard that you've already publicly committed to. 4 would be indirect value exchanges. So give something to party A that costs nothing, so they give something to party B, who then gives you what you want but can't ask for directly. So because of the different interests that are around the table, maybe go find something that you can give that you want to get rid of, but that party B really wants. And then that gives you cover or gives you what you want. An example of this might be how in recent years, the United States sent a lot of arms and weapons to Ukraine, but they didn't do it directly. They did it via third parties. So the US had a bunch of old aging, ammo and military equipment that they were going to have to incinerate anyway at great costs. So the US, instead of giving those arms directly and munitions and equipment directly to the Ukrainians, they gave them to someplace like Sweden or Finland or Norway and said, hey, you guys just take this stuff. We don't want it anymore. And then, of course, those countries would back channel that stuff into Ukraine. And in that way, Ukraine would get what they needed from the US with the political cover of other countries being like, oh, well, we just got this stuff from America. And well, then now it's ours. We're going to do whatever we want with it. And it's not America violating any red lines that Russia set. We're just like disposing of it the way we want to. So that's often how you can play the game and get things to go in a circle and get around maybe some traditional constraints that you otherwise might be facing. So if you think away from the table and you think the negotiation before the negotiation consistently, you're going to do significantly better. Understanding positions versus interests and orchestrating multi-party dynamics and thinking about allies and how you can get allies on your side that may punch way above your weight give you exponentially more power than any single conversation could. The silver tongue tactics. We started from kind of the weakest tactics to the strongest strategies. And I'm so glad that you stuck around to the end of the video. You are a champion if you are still listening. So go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, like, subscribe, comment down below if you want other stuff related to negotiations. And if you guys found this valuable and you want access to my full 2.5-hour course covering every aspect of negotiation, go ahead and sign up for my school community, which has the only negotiation course of its kind in the sales universe, at least that I'm aware of. Go ahead and click that link below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.